Welcome back, everybody. In this video we're going to look at product notation. Now remember, in our previous video we looked at collecting like terms, and if you remember correctly, when we collect we are adding and subtracting things that are the same. I'm adding apples to apples and apple juice to apple juice, so I cannot add apples to apple juice. But today we're working on product notation, and a product is the answer of a multiplication sum. So in this instance, in this exercise, which is 3B of your homework, we are only going to be looking at what happens when we multiply terms. Now remember, we said that a term would be a sign, a coefficient, and a variable all together. In some instances, our variable has got an exponent, and in some instances, our coefficient does not have a variable, meaning that it is a constant. Now on our example, we've got negative 3x multiplied by 2x squared, and I want to go through the steps. How do we multiply these two terms with one another? So step one is going to be, first of all, we need to work with the signs. Step two is going to be working with the coefficients, which is our numbers in front. And step three is going to be working with our variables. And this is going to be the process we follow every single time. So let's get started. Let's multiply our signs. So we've got negative 1 multiplied by positive 2. So I'm going to write minus times plus. And we know that if you have an uneven number of lines, then it is minus. Minus times plus equals minus. Next up, we're going to look at our coefficients. 3 multiplied by 2. 3 times 2. 3 groups of 2 is going to be 6. 2, 4, 6. And then finally, we're going to look at our variables. X multiplied by x squared. Now what is important here is for you to remember the rules of exponents. And if you remember correctly, we said if you have the same base multiplied by the same base, but the exponents are different, then what happens is that we keep the base and we add the exponents. This means over here I'm going to have x as the same base, 1, because x to the power of 1 is the first one, plus 2. So in order to get my answer, I need to put all of these together, right? So my answer is going to be negative, that's my sign. My coefficient is going to be 6, and my power is going to be, we said x1 plus 2 is going to be x3. So our coefficient, our variable is going to be 6x3, and that is our final answer. Again, we have 3 steps that we follow. You multiply the signs, you multiply the coefficients, and remember you can multiply a coefficient with a constant, and finally you multiply the variables. Let's try something else. Let's use this example when we are saying negative 3 multiplied by 4x. So first of all, I'm going to multiply my signs. So I'm going to say minus times plus, so that equals, minus times plus is negative. Next up, I'm going to look at my coefficients and my constants. 3 times 4 is going to be, I'll write it out, 3 times 4 equals 12. Let me write out this as well. And then finally, we're going to look at our variables, and it's x multiplied, there's nothing over there, so it's just going to be x by itself. Therefore, the answer to this equation is going to be minus 12x. Have a look at that and make sure that you understand where and why. If you are stuck, if there's something that's confusing, tell me exactly what is confusing you. Let's try another example. Let's say 2x is multiplied by negative x squared. So I start, step 1 is my sign, so it's going to be positive and negative, plus times minus equals minus. Step 2 is going to be coefficient times coefficient. If something's not written down, then it is a 1. So 2 multiplied by 1 equals 2. And finally, I'm going to work with my variables, and that's going to be same base is x, and therefore I add the exponents. There's nothing written, so it's 1 plus 2, that 2 over there, and that gives me x3. And in total, what do I have? I have negative 2x cubed. All right, are you ready for another example? So finally, our example is going to be, let's say we go minus 4x multiplied by minus 2x squared. We know that step 1 is the signs, so minus times minus equals plus. Step 2 is going to be our coefficients, our numbers, so that's going to be, 4, we start with 4. 4 times 2 is 8, and finally our variables, and if there's nothing written, it's to the power of 1. So x, I've got same base, so I add exponents, 1 plus 2, and that gives me x to the power of 3. All in all, my total answer is then going to be positive, so I start there, positive 8x cubed, and that's my final answer. Okay, now in your homework exercise 3b, I'm looking at question 2, and I'm going to do D, H, L, and P. So let's start with D. What I want you to do is to try and do this on your own, and once you've got your own answers, come back and have a look. So pause the video, then come back and have a look and see whether or not you did it correctly. So let's start with our signs. Over here I've got a plus, and here I've got a minus. So plus times minus is minus. Next up, I look at my numbers, or my coefficient and my constant. I got a constant 3 multiplied by a coefficient 2. 3 times 2 is 6. And finally, I look at my variables. Nothing times x by itself is going to be just x. So remember, if it's same base, so this is technically x to the power of 1 plus nothing. So x to the power of 1. Let's look at question H. Let's start with my signs. Minus times plus gives me minus. Next up, I have my coefficients or constants. 3 times 4 is 12. And I've got x with the power of 1. Negative 12x. Question L. I start with my signs. Plus times minus equals minus. 3 times 2 equals 6. And then I've got d to the power of 1 and d to the power of 1. That means I have d 1 plus 1. So all in all, my answer for question L is going to be minus 6d squared. And lastly, let's look at P. So I start with my signs. Plus times minus equals minus. Now I start with my coefficients. 1 times 3 is 3. And finally, my variables. A squared and a is the same base, a and a. So it's a 2 plus 1, a to the power of 1. So in all, my answer for this question is going to be minus 3a cubed. Right, so now we're looking at question 3. Remember, we are doing 3b, product notation. Question 3c. So now we have a situation where we've got multiplication and addition put together. What do we do here? So remember, we said that addition is when we are collecting like terms, and multiplication is when we are doing product notation. According to BODMAS, we do multiplication before addition and subtraction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put those in brackets so that we know that we're doing those first. Okay, so let's get started. on question C, first I'm going to look at my sign. So it's positive times positive. This means I've got plus. On here I've got positive times positive, means I've got plus. Next up, we're going to look at our numbers. 3 times 1 is going to be 3. And on the second one, 2 times 4 is going to be 8. And finally, we're going to work with our coefficients. X squared is our base. 2 plus 0 is just 2. On the second term, we got 2x, x times x, so it's x 1 plus 1, which is going to be x squared. Right, so now I need to add them. The first thing that we did was we did products. First we did our products, and once our products are done, we are going to do our collection of like terms. Right, so now let's collect our like terms. We are looking at this and we're looking at this. So I've got x squared and x squared. They are the same, so they are like terms. Approved. We've got like terms, so I'm going to add, my answer is going to be x squared, and I add my coefficients. 8 plus 3 is going to be 11, and that is my final answer. Let us do question I, because we need space. So first things first, we are going to put brackets around our multiplication. 3a times b, we're going to do that together, and minus 2, or let's say 2c times a, or minus 2c times a. Let's leave the minus out. And then minus 2c times a, which means that since I'm putting the minus in there, there's actually a plus in between the two. So let's start with multiplying. Plus times plus is equal to plus. 3 times 1 is equal to 3. A times b is equal to ab. That remains the same. Now remember, we put the minus in the bracket, so I'm going to put my plus over there, and now I'm going to do it again. Minus times plus is going to be minus. 2 times 1 is equal to 2. And a times c, or c times a, is going to be ca. But remember, we do things in alphabetical order. So instead of writing ca, we're going to write ac, because a comes before c in the alphabet. And that's my final answer. 3ab plus 2ac. And the reason why it's the final answer is because AB is different from AC. If I'm making a smoothie and I put in apples and bananas, that is very different from a smoothie that has apples and carrots in it. So they don't have the same ingredients. I cannot add them together. Now, the one that is missing that we haven't done yet is question F. So let's write out F. F says we've got 3x multiplied by y minus 2x multiplied by 2y. Now how do we calculate this? First of all, we're going to put brackets around our multiplications, and we've got a minus. I'm going to put my minus in the bracket, which means I've got a plus in between. Let's start with our first bracket. Plus times plus is going to be plus. 3 times 1 is going to be 3, and my variables are going to be x times y, so I have x, y. Then I'm going to add my orange plus there in between, and I'm going to work with my second bracket. Minus times plus is minus. 2 times 2 is 4, and x times y is xy. So now I've done step 1, which is creating products. Step 2 is collecting like terms. Do I have like terms? Now look here, I've got xy and I've got xy. Those are exactly the same, therefore I do have like terms. Now I'm going to add them. I know my answer is going to have xy in it because I know that that's the like base. The variables are the same. So let's start with our signs. Plus times minus is going to be minus. 3 times 4 is going to be 12, and I've already put my xy there. Therefore, my answer is going to be negative 12xy. This should be enough for you to be able to complete your work. But if you have any questions, please reach out and I would gladly help you. Thank you for listening.